Okay, and find number 3. Okay, everybody sitting comfortably and all replenished. So what I'll do is I'll run through this Pyroluria 3, which is how to support the person who has the pyroluria. And then Marta's kindly sent us a case study. So when we go off for our break after this one, what I'll do is I'll put the case study in the chat box, and then we'll come back and have a look and see if we can help Marta with this client. So I hope that's okay for everybody. Now, have I shared my screen? Probably not. No, I'm doing the same thing again. Sorry. Really need to get good at this. Right. Are we okay there? Yes, that's better. Okay, so yeah, as I said, this is Pyroluria 3, how to support people who have the condition. So the aims of this section are to understand the pitfalls of treating pyroluria, to enable the design of a personalised programme according to age or health or any other aspects we might need to consider, and then to practice safely and effectively. There are some skeptics, as I said earlier, who don't believe this condition exists, and Dr. Bill Sakula is quite an interesting one to read, so I'd be a bit remiss if I didn't give you that one to just have a quick look at. And as you've seen from this morning, you can see why that might happen. Oops, just on past that. So just a few kind of little bits and pieces as an oversee. If it's genetic, as we said, then it's supplementation for life, basically. It may mean that you might have to start on a high strength program to actually get the body into homeostasis again, but then to settle on what's right for that person. And that would be kind of a program that they might follow, well, indefinitely, but then there might be periods in their life where if they haven't dealt with all their traumas, and not everybody is going to do that, then they might need to increase their zinc or B6 at certain points in time, in the same way we might use a herbal adaptogen, and you might find they might respond better to that actually than increasing B6 and zinc. So there's a few bits to play with, but overall we're looking at something like 50 to 60 milligrams of zinc, and that can be picolinate, gluconate, sulfate, or zinc carnosine daily. And again, it'll be individual for the individual person. Picolinate seems to be the one that is most advocated for this condition, primarily because it's absorbed better. Vitamin B6, taken as P5P, 100 to 200 milligrams daily is a rough average. I think 200 is too much for most people. I tend to go up to about 150 maximum, and then I give them all the spiel about, if you take too much, just watch for these symptoms, because you do get the same symptoms with all of these vitamins. You do get the same symptoms where if you've got too much and too little. So you do tend to see people getting more and more tired if they're taking too much B6, just because you're flooding that sulfation pathway. Manganese, 2 to 4 milligrams daily. And then not forgetting all the other synergistic nutrients and other likely depletions as a result of that. And we've gone through loads of them this morning, so they're all there. Some additional nutrients you might want to think about. Liposomal iron comes up quite a lot. And we talked about a couple of other irons this morning. Lipids comes up quite a lot, and I don't always check the profile, but it's good to check the omega-6, omega-3 profile if they can afford it, and all things considered. Magnesium, we talked about glycinate quite a lot this morning because it's going into the methylation cycle, or magnesium bisglycinate. Malate I would give if the kind of fibromyalgia types, but I would kind of mix the two. And if you can get one that, if you've got a lot of fibromyalgia and you've done all the removing gluten and all that kind of things, and you're not thinking it's that is particularly the problem, just to ease things, getting a combined product just to start them off is often a good idea. A good multivitamin and mineral, being careful with copper and being careful with calcium. Sometimes, rather than use a pyroluria supplement, particularly with these people, if they've got kind of multi-system issues and they've got a lot of methylation defect stuff going on that's kind of outside the immediate pyroluria, often what we do, especially in the emotional detox program, we give them something like pure encapsulations, nutrient 950, because then that covers everything. And we can titrate that as well. I think the regular dose for that is 1 to 2 a day, but some of our patients have gone up to 6 and been really, really successful with it. So sometimes we do that as well. It would be the last thing we do, obviously. We often use protein powder as well. And the reason we use protein powder is because we need to get proteins in for the healing, for stabilizing the blood sugar and for getting fats across the cell membrane, or for getting fats into the system generally, because they need a protein transporter. And often these people can't eat a lot of protein, they just feel heavy and sluggish afterwards, and so they naturally migrate to a rubbish diet, to be honest. So we often give protein powder for that, and maybe in a shake. And sometimes we add, well, quite often I add taurine and glycine. We often need to give neurotransmitter support in the early days, first 2 or 3 months. If they've got a lot of pain, I tend to go for PEA. If they're more kind of not sleeping, low melatonin, low serotonin, I tend to go for tryptophan or 5-HTP. If they're really, really anxious and I've reached a stage where I think the B6 and zinc must be adequate for what they're doing now, or I've tested and the B6 and zinc look okay in terms of levels, I might recommend GABA or theanine. I know we're not supposed to recommend GABA here, but a lot of the stuff that Amrita have got, well, let's say a lot of the stuff, they've got some really great products by Quicksilver Scientific, one of which is GABA with theanine, and it's liposomal and it works like a treat. So to be honest, what I say to mine is I'm not technically allowed to recommend this because, you know, it's not even supposed to be in the country, apparently, according to our kind of legal people, EU directives. But it is available, and it's available all over. The other thing that Judy Scott uses quite avidly is GABA Calm, which is a nice, it's just a tablet that disintegrates on the tongue. And both of those products I've had amazing success with, because if they are panicking all the time and they are losing all the B6 that you're putting in and you can't get the panic under control, often you can't do anything else with that. You can use theanine to balance GABA, but if there's no GABA there to start with, what's it balancing? So I do tend to like those combined products. The betaine HCl, we often have to do that as well, because obviously B6 and zinc are making stomach acid, and if they're not digesting and absorbing, they're not getting what they need. And that all comes from another Townsend letter. Well, I think it's the same Townsend letter from Klinghardt, who's just avid for all of this. It does make a difference how old they are, a big difference. The comorbidities, the age, the health challenges will all determine whatever the programme is. There's a huge need to address biochemical and epigenetic impact of developmental trauma. Because if you don't address this, they're continually going to be challenged with, like we said this morning in the trauma section, all those scenarios that trigger that same emotion that happened at the time when the developmental trauma or the attachment trauma or even the birth trauma started to rear its ugly head. And all of that creates the pyroluria, the neurotransmitter imbalances, blood glucose dysregulation, HPA-HPT axis and hormone imbalances, mast cell activation, dysbiosis, leaky gut, circadian rhythm dysfunction, mitochondrial dysfunction. And then, of course, with all of that, you've got the toxic buildup of heavy metals, mold, liver, kidneys and lymph all struggling. And then on top of that, you've then got genetics. So you might have the DAO, the MTHFR, the COMT, MAOB, they're all genes that fall into this category. And then, as Klinghardt says, you've got the opportunistic infections, so the Lyme's, the mycoplasma and the viruses. And if this is underpinning all of that, you know, this is that chronic disease state. Impact of early life stress. We did touch on a bit of this morning. So this is Nikki Sky's paper, and the link to it is there on the slide. She did a brilliant paper. It's 2013, so it's a bit old now, but what she looked at, she was looking at the limbic system particularly, because of course, as we said this morning, when you have a massive traumatic event, the brain shunts that memory, shuts down the brain just before impact, shunts the memory into the amygdala, and then we can't access it by talking therapies. The only reason we access it is because we keep getting into situations where that emotion gets triggered again. It might be a similar situation, it might be something completely different, but anything that triggers that same emotion will cause a resurgence of that memory in the energetic part of the body, the aura, for want of a better description, and we won't be aware of that, but it's going on. And what that does is it causes something called limbic kindling. And so the limbic system just on fire. It's quite interesting, it's limbic kindling, and I'd urge you to read that paper on it as well. Because if someone, for a person who you're trying avidly to try and get them onto supplementation because you know they need it for this particular reason, and every time you try anything they just have a nasty reaction, then that's a limbic kindling person. And unless they've done dynamic neural brain retraining, you're not going to get them past that stage. Annie Hopper is the woman who's designed dynamic neural retraining. It's a beautiful therapy. The basis of it is a CBT thing called the stop process, which is all about stopping your conscious thoughts, taking some deep breaths, grounding yourself with your breath, and then re-looking at the situation. And they teach you how to do that on that program. That's not the only thing, but that is the basis of where it all comes from. The online program doesn't cost that much. It's about $80 or something. But I always say to my patients, if they've got limbic kindling, I always say, yes, buy the program by all means, because it's great to do it on your own. They recommend that you do it in 4 days. So you just set time aside and do it, because what you're doing is you're creating new neural pathways here, and you've got to practice that. If anybody who listens to Joe Dispenza, you'll know that to create new neural pathways, you have to repeat and repeat and repeat. And so how the DNRS works is to keep repeating all that stuff over a 4-day period, and then you get back into swing. It normally takes 3 to 6 months, depending on the extent of the problem. But I always say to my patients, even though that's an American problem and the American company, and you've got a time zone difference, I would urge them to make an appointment with one of Annie Hopper's registered practitioners and have at least 1 or 2 appointments to make sure they get the technique right. Because there's nothing worse than buying a program like this, but not having the technique right and then going all the way through the program and feeling no better. Because we know it works, that's the thing. So I always say that to them. Not everybody in that situation has got limbic kindling, because one of the things Nikki and I have been doing over the last couple of years, because we've been working together on the emotional detox program, we'll say when I started as a practitioner with her, her patients are all limbic kindling. She doesn't see anything else. And I think it's who we attract, really. When I started to be a practitioner, I found it really hard work. And the reason for that was the limbic kindling people, they're the kind of people you get on Zoom with them and they just chuck everything at you. And you're like, overwhelmed. And I get overwhelmed quite easy. So I had to say to her, I don't want any more patients. But then I had to look at mine and say, well, mine are similar and the same underlying etiology exists in all of them. My chronic fatiguers are chronic fatiguers. But with mine, what I'm seeing is they have limbic, they have downregulation of the limbic system because some of them have got birth trauma. You know, and it might not be massive birth trauma, it might be just something simple like meconium staining and a bit of a low heart rate where they've just had to rest before completing the birth process. Some have had severe birth trauma. And so mine are very different. So it's a case of looking at them and going, okay, is this a person who is throwing everything at you and you can't get a word in edgeways and they're in the story and in the head because that's typical limbic kindling? Or is it someone who can't actually get the words out and knows they're actually disassociated from their own, you know, their own feelings and emotions? So that's the limbic kindling side. That's obviously going to set up brain inflammation. So we need to be aware of that, because once the brain's inflamed, nothing up there works, does it, as we know? It's obviously puts them in sympathetic dominance. And if you've got birth or attachment trauma in your timeline, then that's going to keep you in sympathetic dominance. Until you address that, you're not going to get out of it. You might come out of it for a small amount of time, but something will trigger and you'll go back. You'll also make really wrong relationship decisions as well and end up with the wrong people, the abusers and all that kind of stuff. And the other area we work on is vagal tone, because obviously you've got the brain-gut direct link now, and you've got the dysbiosis and you've got the brain inflammation. So you've got messages going backwards and forwards. The vagus nerve ends up on fire and then just stops triggering. So that will give rise to anxiety, because the vagal nerve brings us out of fight or flight. It'll also give rise to low stomach acid, and gastroparesis often comes as a result of that. And we've got the work by Porges, Polyvagal Theory. That's an amazing book if you've not read it. So yeah, so low vagal tone has been connected to all kinds of things. And these are some of them. Low vagal tone is measured very much by HeartMath, the HeartMath Institute. They've done all the research on this. And what they've found is low heart rate variability is linked to all these diseases: inflammation, diabetes, Alzheimer's, depression, Parkinson's, dementia, obesity, heart disease, PTSD, anxiety, ADHD, childhood trauma, cancers, poor cognitive function, fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome. I mean, that's massive on its own, isn't it? But yeah, vagal tone is huge. Again, it's one thing that as a nutrition therapist, we may not necessarily think about it. It's easy to solve. It takes a lot of work, but there's some really brilliant gadgets on the market to help that. It's a shame that they're all expensive, but there you go. So just from the research perspective, when looking at vagal nerve stimulation, The FDA have approved treatment for severe depression, vagal nerve stimulation for severe depression. They've also approved it for treatment for epilepsy, and a lot of the epilepsies where the Leonard Gestalt type people, where they've got 4 different types of seizures going on, and no medication will give them a resolution, and all the medications turn them into just moribund nothings really. So a lot of those kids particularly are getting vagal nerve stimulators implanted for that reason. It reduces insulin resistance, and there's a study there. There's loads of studies. I've just picked 1 or 2 out here. It reduces the incidence of neuralgia, reduces migraines, it supports mitochondria. It even helps nerve damage, particularly after cerebrovascular accident or strokes. It's brilliant for things like fear and anxiety, because there's nothing like fear to drive anxiety anyway. They've used them extensively in cases of PTSD, fibromyalgia, and the autoimmune things like psoriatic arthritis and ankylosing spondylitis, and also for intestinal permeability. So quite a lot of evidence for the use of vagal nerve stimulation. It's just that nobody's really saying anything about it. There's also some stuff that we can use. So our bottom-up approach is we can all teach someone to deep breathe. It doesn't take a mastermind to tell someone to take slow, deep breaths and how to do that. And I guess most of us have done some yoga in our time. And if yoga's not all about breathing, I don't know what is. Time in nature. There's nothing like nature to heal, you know, and loads of our doctors now, or at least a handful of them, are out there, you know, they've come over from Western medicine, they're on this side of the fence now, they're writing books about why we need to be out in nature. Singing, gargling, humming, all resets vagal tone. And I remember my dad in the nursing home, when I used to go and see him, they always used to say, it's almost like he knows when you're coming to see him because he starts humming. And he used to say, it's nothing to do with me. He's always done that. And he's done it since he had his vagotomy and pyloroplasty. And I think he was trying to stimulate his vagal tone because he'd had a vagotomy. And it's just nature doing that. And he had dementia. Why else would he do that? You know, because he's not even aware of the world now or then. So yeah, so all of that. Chanting, there's a reason for that as well. You know, and if each different vibration of the wherever you do it, works with a different chakra as well. So all of that. Tai Chi is another great bottom-up approach. Essential oils, omega-3s, omega-6s, they're all going to reduce inflammation. Triggering the gag reflex, not sure I want to do that religiously, but there you go. Coffee enemas, they do it as well. Citrulline is really good for this as well. Obviously exercise, because that's going to reduce your stress anyway. Probiotics, and now we're getting more and more really good research from people like In Vivo Clinical and Toxaprevent, who've got their own kind of testing, stool testing, allied with specific combinations of probiotics that are becoming more patient specific. So that's all a step in the right direction. Beetroot juice, brilliant for stimulating bile flow, which of course is going to help vagal nerve stimulation. Fasting is also heavily researched. Massage, listening to music. Wim Hof, anybody who loves Wim Hof, cold therapy, that works. And acupuncture, because that's going to work on the meridians. And then we've got things like, top-down approaches. So these are going to work from the top of Klinghart's model. Meditation, positive social relationships, practicing forgiveness. We're told to do this all the time, but actually doing it and feeling it are 2 different things, and that takes work as well. Having a fulfilling job. Laughter is great, obviously. Prayer, that's another one. Network spinal and somatorespiratory integration are 2 of my favourites, I think. And I think they're easy things to recommend for people, and they cover all 4 levels, 4 out of the 5 levels of healing. So it's just one, you know, if it's right for that person and that person resonates with it, I just think that's a good step in the right direction. Psychotherapy is a top-down approach. EMDR we've talked about. EFT, changing mindset, can be brilliant. Biofeedback and neurofeedback, they've always been sat there in the periphery somewhere. Craniosacral therapy, I love that. If a child's got things like reflux and they've had a bit of a difficult birth or a slow birth or something like that, where they're just in fight or flight, rather than send them down the medication route, to try some craniosacral first. Psychotherapy we've talked about, and somatic experiencing. And these top-down approaches, most of what they're doing is they're helping us to feel again, because those people who are traumatized, they don't feel at all, they shut it all down. In fact, to be fair, most of society shuts it down, because we're what's the word? We are conditioned to not feel a lot of things, to not feel anger, to not feel frustration. You know, if you feel frustrated or angry at school because the girl next door to you has just stolen your last pencil, and then you go and try and get it back, you're the one who gets caught, aren't you? You know, because she's discreet about stealing it, but you go, that's mine, and then you get caught. So that all has an impact on us. So emotions and HRV, and this is like 40 odd years of research evidence by HeartMath, and what they're showing here in this picture is that we all have an electromagnetic field around the heart, and that extends several feet away from the body. And anybody who can see auras, or who's read anything about auras, will kind of understand this in a way. This electromagnetic field is 100 times stronger than the field around the brain. And what they're seeing is 75% of the 75% correlations of patterns with heart rate variability and emotions. So everything is kind of into that heart led now. We're very what's the word? We're very brain focused. You know, we're in our brain all the time. We're analysing, we're thinking stuff through, we're churning stuff over. But actually, when you come out, when you take some really nice deep breaths and you're in nature and you just put your hands on your heart and somatically connect, you actually get much better resolutions to your questions just by asking your inner self in that way, or loving your inner self. And this is what HeartMath have been really working on for all these 45 years to try and teach us. And they're teaching us through the fact that when we've got more negative emotions, our heart rate variability really drops. And they've got hundreds of studies. It's just worth delving into their data. Emotions, memories, belief systems, we don't even know where they're stored. Because how can we store everything in this little brain? You know, we've got a tiny little bit here and we think everything's stored in there. But Karl Pribram is a German neuroscientist, and what he's saying is that we carry everything in our energetic field, aura, energy field, and it's kind of like an onion layer. And for anybody who's ever done any shamanic work, or the other work that works for this is biofield tuning. What they do is they read these patterns of energy that go out about 6 feet, and they can use a drum, or the biofield tuning people will use a tuning fork, and then they'll get the tuning fork vibrating, and they'll bring the tuning fork in from about 6 feet out. And when the resonance changes, they know that there's a trauma there in that area of the energy field. So then they'll bang the fork again, or they'll bang the drum again, and they'll disturb that energy field, and it pulls the trauma out. But the person is not traumatized by that, or re-traumatized, if that's the right word, because you're disturbing the energy field and you're shifting the energy that way. So what will happen is they might have a few tears or something because you've disturbed that energy field, and because that emotion's coming out, and it might come out in tears, or it might come out in anger even. but they won't have the memory of what caused that. So it's a really beautiful way of healing trauma. NSA works the same way, but it works from the spine rather than outward. But yeah, so this is what HeartMath are looking at. Where do we store all this? And there's a few people talking about it. I just think it's fascinating how we store it all there. These are just some useful sources. Anybody who's really interested in this, I think they're all good. I love them all. I mean, Bessel van der Kolk is a trauma therapist. Gabor Mate was a GP, and then he majored on addiction. He's got some beautiful stuff on YouTube, how he talks about trauma and his own attachment trauma and where that came from. And, you know, for a GP who puts himself out there like that and, you know, tells the world all his innermost thoughts and feelings and does it in such a way as gets my respect, really. He's good. This is one I use all the time. The Secret Language of Your Body by Inner Seagull. And the reason I use it is when people come in to see me, I do all the timeline, I do all the biochemistry, and then I want to see how their emotions affecting anything to do with this, and especially if they've got trauma, attachment trauma, whatever. What I want to do is just say to them, yeah, there's some emotions that affect that, and these are they. And how this book's set out is the first third of the book is about all the systems of the body, all the organs, and what how the Chinese, Ayurvedic, older types of medicine, how they saw the body in those times. She's put it all in there. So the organs and the systems, what emotions are behind those, or where we store those emotions. So liver is anger, frustration, gallbladder, suppressed anger, all that kind of stuff. And so she's got that in the first part. And then in the middle, she's got the spine. And every spinal, every spinal, what's the word? Every vertebrae has an emotion attached to it, or a number of emotions. And so she's got that, like C1, T4, whatever the thing is, and then which emotions are there. And then in the last part of the book, she's got conditions, so chronic fatigue's in there, epilepsy's in there, IBS is in there. And it'll tell the person what kind of emotions or what string of emotions are likely to be in that area. And when I read that section out, and it's only about 3 or 4 lines for each bit, so it's not onerous. When I read it out to people, they just go, oh my God, yeah. And then you can say to them, right, okay, you can do some energetic healing on that. Because there's there's a lovely person called Wendy Myers, who's just, she's the detox queen, and she's just taken over Nikki Gratrix's emotional detox course. She's launching it tomorrow as it happens. And I did that course for a year last year, and I'll tell you, it was life-changing. And so, you know, there are places you can send them. It's all online. So, you know, and they're in a group where, like us today, we're sharing information. But I just like that to show people, if I think they're open to it. I wouldn't do it for everybody, obviously, but I think they're open to it, a bit of that. And this one, Jacques Martel, that's a more in-depth version of this. It really, you know, you get a page and a half on each system or organ. But that doesn't have any tools to help you overcome any of this. Whereas for those who are like Reiki practitioners or have had Reiki and understand it, or those kind of things, massage, they'll like this book, because right in the back of this book, there's tools, like there's energy things that you can use on yourself, like affirmations, like colour therapy, like essential oils. So whilst it's whilst it only gives you a small amount of information, it does give you really useful stuff at the end. And then these others, these are just about, you know, when we avoid our emotions, when we shut them down, then, you know, we can expect to be ill at some point in time. But they're just lovely books. So that's kind of put it all into a nutshell in terms of what we need to do. So if we go through the different categories of people, that we might come across. Because how we would support a 6-year-old is so different to how we would support a 60-year-old, for definite. So we can look at first things first, and we can say with the children, there are certain products that are suitable for kids that, because the adult ones, they're just not suitable for kids at all, obviously, for obvious reasons. Depirol has always been around for the kids. I can't remember how long this has been around. It's a long time. We have to get it from Europe, and it's the guy who sells the aloe ride, the dried aloe vera, the German chappie. So it's coming in from Germany. So it's a bit intermittent in, how quick you can get it, etc., because it's coming from Germany and it's coming through customs. But it was kind of always the first port of call, because it was the only thing on the market. Since then, we've now got the BioPure Core, and we've had that a few years now. It is Klinghart's own combination. So it's available on Kai Science, which is Klinghart's wife's supplement company. And I think you can get it on places like iHerb as well. It's not in any of our natural dispensary or Amrita. I don't know why. So it's a bit awkward on the ordering. It's kind of, you set up an affiliation with them and you buy it into your practice if you want to sell it on and make a profit from it. I can't be bothered with all that, to be honest. So I just give them the link and tell them to get it themselves. There's also the iGenis do a product called Neurobalance, which is just magnesium, B6 and zinc. With this one, sometimes you can start people off on this because you've got the basics, but you haven't got anything else. But it also helps, if you're using a general multivitamin, or this is a child who's coming on a multivitamin, and you don't want to start changing everything because you're going to change the biochemistry too much, you might use iGenis Neurobalance to add the extra B6 and zinc in. That might be a nice thing to do with it. For those who are super sensitive, or can't take tablets, capsules, whatever, because we are talking kids here, there isn't a supplement out there that I'm aware of that we can use across the skin, which is sad, really, because it would be great if there was. But the metabolics liquids, I love those, and I use them quite a lot. The tiny doses, because they're ionic minerals and ionic vitamins. And so you can start with 1 drop and you can titrate up, and then I've never had a bad reaction to any of these in any of the kids at all. I sometimes use them for the adults as well if I'm really scared with the adults and they're really toxic. So metabolic liquids, absolutely love those. But again, they're not available in natural dispensary. You've got to go to metabolics themselves. And you've got to do them all individually. So you'd be looking at a liquid B6, a liquid zinc, a liquid manganese, etc., and you'd be just going up from there. But as I said, they are really lovely products. They're really clean. There's nothing in them. There's no additives in them, so they don't last long either. Once you've opened them, you've got to use them within a month. I'm trying to think if that's the same with the BioCore. No, it's not. So yeah, with the adults, again, you can still use Depirol. I think there's 3 different levels of Depirol. There's one for small kids, there's one for the intermediates, and there's one for the adults. So you could use any ones you thought. The BioPure Core contains biotin, boron, chromium, taurine, magnesium, manganese, molybdenum, B6 and zinc. So you can see why that's a good one. That's all transsulfuration pathway and pyroluria. There's also the designs for health, zinc synergy, which again I quite like. This is very nice for basic methylation. So that's got your B2, your B6, zinc, molybdenum, taurine and malic acid. So if you've got somebody who's a bit in pain, malic acid can work really well. And also malic acid is brilliant for those who've got sluggish bile, or you suspect sluggish bile, because malic acid is brilliant for getting bile flowing. And of course, taurine's part of bile. Hygienist Neurobalance again. I mean, I tend not to use that on its own. I tend to add it to stuff. And then we talked about the glutathione HPU. Very different because it's got the glutathione in it. It's obviously got the zinc, B6, manganese. This has got selenium in as well to help with the glutathione cycling. And then it's got superoxide dismutase and catalase, which is something that it doesn't very often come in supplements. Tends to be the ones from biotics research or allergy research that have loads of this stuff in. But it can be really useful. This is the only pyroluria supplement that's got a bit of copper in it. So again, you know, it's horses for courses, and it's whether you feel that this is right for that particular person. You might have an organic acid test that will give you a lot of these markers for the vitamin depletions, etc. So that'll give you a good idea anyway. It's also got biotin. And the caveats, we've said it time and time again, so hopefully you've got it now. But as soon as you start to deliver B6 or zinc or minerals, as soon as these are commenced, heavy metals are released. So you've got to be ready for that. This is not going to happen so much in the child, but it might do in a child who's already neurologically disturbed, or autism spectrum, ADHD, those kind of kids. You've got to make sure all channels of elimination are open. So I always do the things like it might be liquid magnesium to get the bowels going initially, but the B6 and zinc will shift them once it gets into the system. Or linseed, if you can get linseed in, because I love linseed for bowels. And just aim for 2 bowel motions daily, because everything we do with this person, all the toxins are going to go through the liver, through the gall, through the bile, and then out through the stool. And if the stool's sluggish, they're just going to recycle and recycle. I always support the kidneys as well. And I've got some supplements that I generally use for that. And I use Wayback Water and Aqua Vortex, which again, these are new things that I've only learned in the last couple of years, and again, from personal experience. Wayback Water is structured water. So if you've heard of structured water, easy water, they're all similar things. Dan, I can't remember his surname, but it's called Dan. But the link's on the next page, so you'll get it. He's a physicist who did all the research on Wayback Water and created it in the States, and we were all buying it in the States up until about 3 months ago. And then BioNutri, we got BioNutri to bring it into the UK, so they've just built a plant to make it under Dan's instructions, and they've made it 33% more active. So it's now available in natural dispensary, and just as they did that, Dan passed away, bless his heart, he was in his 70s. So Wayback Water, you got to be careful with that. There's a ramp up program, so you start very low and very slow, and you build it up over about 12 weeks, I think, because it detoxes the body like the clappers. So if you're doing a lot of detox, don't do this at the same time, maybe do the water first. Well, the idea of structured water is the cells need structured water because they need some sustenance to keep the shape, basically. I mean, we know water as, you know, you drip it on the side and it just runs everywhere. But how the research has been done on the structured water, for those who are not aware, if you do a tuning fork and you have a glass of normal water there, tap water, and a glass of structured water there, what will happen is you put the fork in the middle vibrating, the regular tap water it'll just go into chaos. So you'll just see like not even ripples, they're just like dimples in the top, like an orange skin. The structured water will create a crystal, and you'll actually see that crystal. So, and there's loads of lovely YouTube videos, or you can try it yourself. It's not expensive. And so I get my patients on that as well to help the hydration, because there's nothing worse than hydration for all of us for energy. The Aqua Vortex is a little what do you call it? It's a little spiral that goes into a regular funnel, and then you pour your water through it. So, you know, you've filtered your water, you've added back, you then put it through the aqua vortex, which livens it up, because all our water's dead, because it's just either sat in a bottle or it's sat in a pipe for Lord knows how long. It's not actually going through stones and down waterfalls to liven it up. It's years since that happened to it. It's been sat in a reservoir. So the aqua vortex brings the life back to it, and again hydrates better. So what we do is we filter the water, then we put it through the aqua vortex into whatever receptacle we're using, and then we add way back water to it. So that's, yeah, I do that as well. I also teach breathing techniques. I am a heart math coach, so I do that anyway, but you don't have to be a heart math coach to do this. You know, we've all got breathing techniques we've been taught. And that's to help with pH correction as well, because obviously you're burning off your CO2. The skin's going to detox like the clappers, because if these channels of elimination are not fully open and we're waiting for them to open, the skin's going to be the detox organ. So what I do with that is Epsom salts baths. Sometimes I add apple cider vinegar if I think the skin will tolerate it. Sometimes I ask them to soak a lemon and chop that up and put that in, because lemon's brilliant for, well, all citrus fruit is brilliant for bringing emotions down, fired up emotions. So often I'll do that, as long as they're not super sensitive, because lemon will burn the skin in the bath as well, so you've got to be careful of that, as would apple cider vinegar. The other thing I might use is electrolytes, so something like potassium bicarb, sodium bicarb in the bath, just to help the alkalizing, and then to pull more toxins out, because the more you get into the bath water, especially emotional as well, when I mean, emotions just come out in the water. That's why we all love a hot bath, and that's like why we like swimming in the sea, because we get rid of all the emotions there that we're locking in. Plus we get all that ions from the earth and the Schumann resonance. The other thing I use quite a lot, especially with the kids and especially with the really sick, is the ion cleanse foot bath. It's expensive. It's like £1,800 to buy, and then you've got to buy an array every 60 to 70 baths, which is about 60 quid. But I can honestly say to you, it was the best money I ever spent personally. The lady who sells these in the UK is Stella Minton Chadwick, who has Brainstorm Health, which is an autism clinic, and she gets these in at a really good deal. So our patients go and buy them. We get a bit of a thing for selling them, a bit of commission for selling them, and the patients have a really good deal in that they're so confident with this product that none get sent back, that they will give a 6-week back to base full refund guarantee. And all they have to do is you have to tell Stella that you're interested, and then she just gives you a code to put into the sales bit, you know, where they ask you for a discount code, and they just put that code in there, which is yours, and then she sorts everything else out. But that's amazing for bringing out heavy metals and toxins, and it works in the same way but stronger, as if you were walking in the sea all day, because you're picking up the ions from the Earth's atmosphere. So what this is doing is changing the ions from positive to negative all the time, or, you know, within a certain time scale. And you do literally just sit there with your feet in it for 30 minutes, and you do that 2 or 3 times a week. So that's a really good one for detoxing massively. You can even use these in your clinics. I often use mine in my clinic, and if I've got somebody who's feeling a bit under the weather, I'll just say, hang on, let's get the foot bath out and we'll do your consultation while you've got your feet in the foot bath, and just makes life nicer for them. You might need binders. The older they are, the sicker the patient is, generally speaking. So as soon as you start to see heavy metals being released, or if you suspect that because you've tested and you know they're there, then you might need to use binders, and you probably need to use binders if they've got mold as well, because all that's going to start to come out of the body when you start to support it. These are your water enhancers, as I said, and you've got links to both of them there, so you can go and there's a lovely on the Way Back Water site, there's a lovely video. It is about 3.5 hours long, so warn you before you go on there. But if you're a biochemist or a physicist, it's all numbers. It'll excite you to the nth degree. And then there's a nice little video on the Panasonic website where they sell this, just telling you what it's all about, basically. But I love both of them, and I can honestly say to you, this one, the Way Back Water, when I did my second ramp up, which was from 2 ounces to 4 ounces, that's double the dose. And the full dose is 20 ounces. So, you know, I was a long way from the full dose. What happened to me was I felt lousy. I felt really tired and run down and just not myself. And I thought, if I go out for a walk, I'll feel loads better. It was in the first lockdown, so I just went for a woodland walk. And when I came out of the woods the other side, I just laid on the grass. It was about 1:30 in the afternoon. And then at 4:30, two guys, 17-year-old kids, bless them, thought I were dead. So they were in the middle of lockdown, they're shaking me thinking I'm dead. So I must have looked a right sight. And that was because I was detoxing madly from that stuff. So, you know, that's why I'm saying be careful with it. It really does work. And the Aqua Vortex, I put that in later, quite a bit later actually, maybe 3 months later. And what I found with the Aqua Vortex, I thought, they sell that in stainless steel or silver and in gold, and they recommend you buy the stainless steel one first, which is about 15 quid. And then if you want to, you go on to the gold one, which is about 50 quid. And I just went, do you know what, I've done all this before, I'm just going to get the gold one. I don't know whether it made a vast amount of difference, you know, but the first 48 hours, I went, no, 24 hours, don't tell lies on. First 24 hours, I thought, well, that was a waste of 50 quid. Maybe I should have got the silver one. I wouldn't have wasted so much. And then lo and behold, not 2 hours after that, did I start drinking 8 litres the first day, 7 litres the second day. And I'm thinking, how can I drink this much? I'll be waterlogged. And we've all heard the story about, you know, a nutrition therapist telling somebody to go away and drink loads, and did that and then ended up in hospital. So I actually thought that was going to happen. But it went on for about a week. And then with this insane thirst, and then suddenly my body metabolized it, and then I never got the wrinkles that you get, you know, when you go in the bath for 3 hours and you come out and all your fingers are wrinkled. Mine were always wrinkled, and so that all went away, and I got loads of energy from it, I can honestly say. So that's the water. The other thing to consider is binders, and again, they're going to be horses for courses. Some people are going to respond more to some than others. We've known about the clays forever. We've known about charcoal forever. The evidence at this point in time is saying that active charcoal is not doing what we think it's supposed to do. And so there's some really new charcoals on the market that are made from things like coconut shell, bamboo, and I'm having some really good results with those, I have to say. There's a lovely one that's dirt cheap. Again, it's charcoal, yeah, no, it's not. It's a bamboo charcoal, and it's made by a company called Not the Norm. It's a great name, isn't it? Not the Norm. And it basically, you can buy a week's worth of it, which is 2 capsules last thing at night. That's how I do it, so that it's there in the bowel to catch the toxins as they come out of the gallbladder and the liver first thing on the morning. So they're Not the Norm. It's about £5.99 to buy a week's worth, and then, you know, they're not spending a packet and throwing stuff away. So that one I do like. Glucomannan, I don't use very much anymore, and I haven't used chlorella in a long time. I tend to only use chlorella if they're doing dental work more than anything, because we know that that's kind of high mercury stuff. Humic acid is really making a comeback. I never even realised it was a binder, because I always use humic and fulvic acid for antiviral protection. But there's one that's come out in the last year called Black Oxygen Organics, which everybody's spouting its virtues. I haven't seen any specific evidence on that specific product, but I do like humic and fulvic acid, both as a binder and as an antiviral. And I think if it's serving two purposes, obviously that's going to be cheaper, isn't it? Clinic Tillalite, I've used loads and loads and loads. This is the Toxiprevent products. I often use their leaky gut protocol, so that's 2 capsules an hour before every meal and a powder last thing at night. I often, with the worst ones who've got the mold, etc., I often use charcoal last thing at night as well. So I might use They're Not the Norm, or Takasumi is a nice one from Amrita, which is Supreme Nutrition. That's a beautiful one. Or what's his name? Scientific, Quicksilver Scientific. They do the Ultra Binder, and they've also got Ultra Binder Sensitive. So for those who don't do well with the sulfurs, the Ultra Binder Sensitive's much better. With the small kids, I tend to use the Enteris gel, which they can buy from Boots, just because it's easy. All these others are capsules and powders. They taste like nothing else on earth. It's like eating cardboard. The adults will happily chew them down to feel better, because they do feel better almost instantly if you get the right amount going in. The kids get, it's cruel to try and get kids to take all that. So the Enteris gel just comes in a little packet, and it doesn't taste too bad either. It's a bit sweetened, and so they just popping it in, and it's more like a liposomal product. Citrus pectin, I try to leave right until the end, and I only use it if I can't get away with anything else. If they're really struggling, they're really not binding up everything, and I'm having to put more and more binders in, and the more binders you put in, the drier the intestinal terrain becomes, and then they're constipated if they're not drinking loads. But citrus pectin tends to be really aggressive, and so I tend to just use that as a last resort, and I never use it on the kids. So we've talked about transsulfuration loads today, and this is just to say Epsom salts baths, because they've got the magnesium sulfate. So where the person's not making sulfate because the transsulfuration is not working at this point in time, at least they're getting it across the skin. There are some supplements that have sulfate in them, and I know BioCare do a nice liver support, HEP, whatever it's called, 127 or something. And that's got sulfate in it, but sulfate is not great across the gut wall. We've used iron sulfate for donkey's years, and all it does is causes them to have diarrhea or constipation. So I tend, if I can get away with it, not to put sulfate in anything, or not to try and get sulfate in through the mouth, and just do it through Epsom salts baths. And then they've got the added benefits of the magnesium as well. For an adult, I'd normally use 4 cupfuls per bath, and I'd get them to soak for 30 minutes, longer if they can, and to do that immediately before bed, and then to use a hot water bottle or something to warm the bed so that they can detox when they get into bed. And then I warn them to just go straight to bed, because the magnesium will just drop the blood pressure. So if they're prone anyway to low blood pressure, they're going to be fainting, or not fainting, but just feeling a bit ugh. So I warn them about that and just say get straight to bed. Molybdenum, I tend to use BioCare's Nutrisorb molybdenum. I love that one. It's easy, it's 1 drop a day. If it's a child, I might use Metabolics, because theirs is half the dose and it's still a liquid, and it's ionic as well, so you could use that. Taurine, I'm not precious about which brand of taurine. It's a case of whatever we've got in stock basically. And then riboflavin, often they need loads of this. Normally you can tell if someone is really B2 deficient and you haven't got a test, because they're usually really light sensitive, and that's either riboflavin deficiency or it's fatty acids with A&D deficiency. Mary Megson did some beautiful research on the autistic kids donkey's years ago now, where she used cod liver oil to help visual perception. And visual perception was going off because the kids were really highly light sensitive. And so when they were trying to read the words on the page, the words were dancing because of the contrast between the black and white. So she did some lovely research on that. So yeah, we tend to give lots of riboflavin. There's not many companies that do riboflavin on its own. It is the one that causes the urine to go bright yellow, so just be wary of that. And so Thorn Research do one that's about 35.5 milligrams. Metabolics do a liquid and a capsule one, and they're both fairly low doses. Seeking Health do one that is about 400 milligrams, which is a capsule. So you've got quite a variety there to take from. There'll be others that do them, but not many do it singly on its own. And glycine we've just talked about all day. You know, I don't think any of mine are not on glycine. I just find it so useful. And it is one of the things that's reduced in pyroluria. So what about being safe and sound with all of this? When we do this on the emotional detox program, we kind of start outside in. We know we can't treat the pyroluria straight away because they're more toxic. So we start with the external detox, and we advise them either to get a far infrared sauna, and we normally advise the one that's got the TheraSage one, because it's also got the red light in, and red light therapy you can't beat. For all sorts of things, you could use red light therapy to regenerate organ tissue, and some people have done it with thyroid tissue. And there's evidence on that red light therapy. We recommend the AMD ion cleanse, and we recommend the Epsom salts baths with all the extras that I've said to you earlier. We also, at this point, so that we can get metabolic reserve to do the rest of the journey, we aim on supporting body-wide communication at this point in time. So we look at the HPA-HPT axis, and we look at neurotransmitters, and I just use a quiz for the neurotransmitters. I use J. Lombard's neurotransmitter quiz. I can send you a link to it, but it's on the clinical education website. They got J. Lombard in years ago to talk about neurotransmitters, but you can just put J. Lombard neurotransmitters and it'll come up. I've just adapted it so my patients can fill it in. But all it is, it's a list of the neurotransmitters, and then underneath the symptoms associated with low or high, and the patient just ticks off what they've got. I tell them not to think about it, just to do it. So I look at the neurotransmitters and say, right, what's high, what's low? Because of course we can't test them. You know, the closest we can get to them is what's coming out in the urine. But I will say the number of neurotransmitter tests I've done, they've always massively helped me clinically. So I don't think it's that bad what we get from them. We always support with essential fatty acids because of course we want to get the inflammation down. And we nearly always have to give betaine hydrochloride. And that's the starting point. So when you're looking at the HPA-HPT axis, you might be thinking about, if you've done genes or you've done a neurotransmitter quiz or test, you might be thinking PEA, tyrosine, 5-HTP, GABA, anything along that ilk to make sure that they're working. You might also be looking at thyroid, adrenals, HPA axis, so you might work from that perspective. And again, it's each different person. You know, if they've got a lot of anxiety and stress, and it's been ongoing and the dopamine, serotonin are low, well, you can look at that and go, right, okay, this is more HPA axis. I need to support the organs that are struggling. And you'll have that in your questionnaire as well, because we've got the profiles in the questionnaires that talk to us about that. So, you know, it's either one or the other. It's not, sometimes there might be a bit of both, because sometimes you might need to give GABA or you might need to give tyrosine. So we do that next. And we would do that for about 3 months, 2 to 3 months. And then we would go in and we'd say, right, what is going on with the gut microbiome? And then we'd rebalance the gut microbiome and heal the gut wall. And that would be another 2 to 3 months. Oops. And then when we've done that, we then go in and remove any heavy metals. And that's at the point where we can start to think about B vitamins, etc. And because this is an emotional detox program I'm talking about, we do emotional detox at this point as well, which is the biofield tuning and all that kind of stuff that Wendy does. And because we're already doing heavy metal detox, pulling the emotions out is going to release heavy metals as well. So it makes sense to do them both together if the patient can tolerate it. But the idea of pulling the heavy metals out after you do the gut work is because if we did this heavy metal stuff and we still had the gut to do, then what would happen is all the heavy metals would feed the dysbiosis. So we'd just end up in a mess. And I think that's what we did in an evolutionary sense before we kind of had programs where we could split this up. And a lot of this is Pomper's work. If you're not familiar with Pomper, Daniel Pomper, he's really good on cellular detox, and a lot of this has come from his work. So once we've done the emotional detox or the heavy metals or both, then we need to look at viral load, because with all of these patients, there's viruses sat in the background. I have to say, I tend not to do much with viral load because I have some lovely people who do bioresonance that I can trust with my life. Not all bioresonance people can do what these people do, because a lot of them are just trained by the companies. And, whilst I've not done any training, so don't take what I say at face value. Sometimes when we do these trainings, we kind of told, just believe the scan. This is what I was taught with Ness. Just believe the scan and just treat what you see. But the thing is, if those people are not homeopaths, naturopaths, doctors, nurses, if they've got no background in how the body works, anatomy and physiology, then they can't look at a scan and say, well, I can't do that because that system's down and I'll impact on that scan. And that's the difficulty when you just see Joe Bloggs, who's, doing this for, because he wants to help the world. People who are serious about it, who have other modalities that they've come from, they do a fantastic job. So if anybody wants that information, I can give them that. I mean, I use Sharmila as one person I send people to, and Sharmila's trained by a lovely lady called Mary Butcher, who's based in, where's she based? In Malton, near Pickering. And that lady actually helped me from coming back from my near-death experience. I think she picked 57 viruses up in my cerebrospinal fluid first time I saw her. So I send people that way, to be honest, because they can do bioresonance alongside what we're doing. We do the nutrition, they do all the energy work, and that helps massively. So I generally do that. Oops, what did I do there? So the final bit we do is, once we've cleared all the bugs, then we support the communication for another 3 months. So we might look at, do we need any more HP? Do we need adrenal, HPA axis, thyroid stuff? Do we need anything to support the inflammation? Well, of course we do. Supporting the digestion, it's all about betaine. We use a pancreas glandula where that's needed, digestive enzymes, bile salts, electrolytes. We just go through the whole thing, comb it all through. Rebalancing the microbiome, depending what we find there, we might be using bifidobacteria on its own. We might be using soil-based. We might be using specific probiotics. So as I said, in vivo and Toxaprevent do both of those very well if you want a company that actually provides you with probiotics that are based on a stool testing thing. Antimicrobials tend to use Designs for Health, GI Microbex quite a lot. The garlics, allicins, those kind of things. What they call it, Scientific, Quicksilver Scientific have got some nice antimicrobials. We might use an antiparasitic If we've got parasites, we might have to get Helicobacter back in its box because he loves a low acid environment, as we all know. And there's a few things there that we might use for Helicobacter: mastic gum, DGL licorice, zinc carnosine. You'll find loads of studies on zinc carnosine and Helicobacter. And the L-reuteri and cliniptilolite, which is Toxiprevent's protocol. I've had some really good success with that, I have to say. But that takes a lot longer. It takes 3 to 4 months for that one, whereas, you know, a combination of mastic gum and zinc carnosine can obliterate it in much less time, 6 weeks, I would say. And of course, they've got the triple antibiotics if they want to do it that way, and some do, because that is quick, that's 3 weeks. And then we have to just go in with the probiotics and make sure that, you know, everything is back on track. But I often really still use the reuteri as well when they've done the GP's route round it. And then we need to look at, have they got mold, because you might need an antifungal for the mold. Sometimes we clear the mold before we do anything else if it's a really bad case, because the mold just really messes up the central nervous system. It causes panic attacks in the early hours of the morning. Every time you walk into a moldy environment, when you've got too much mold in your body, you're just feeling ill and yucky. So sometimes if it's bad enough, I'll do the mold first. And to be honest, the best thing I've found for the mold is the Toxiprevent leaky gut protocol. If you haven't got that, I'd get in touch with Toxiprevent and get their little booklet, because they've got all their protocols in there. So it's worth doing one of their trainings and grabbing that, definitely. But yeah, the mold, it's a biggie, and I think it's big in this country because we're just a little island, aren't we? And you know, we're surrounded by water, we're going to see it everywhere. And we've got certain areas like the northeast, for example, the flat areas, Lincoln, the Wash, all around there. It's just really mouldy because there's nowhere for it to go. It's just circulating the same air. The next thing is heavy metals. So 2 to 3 months on this. The Cellcore range are amazing. I've only really recently started using these, but I'm having some really good results. So the HMET binder is really good for, that's their heavy metal one. Again, I use cliniptilolite a lot, depending on the person. I do find with the cliniptilolite, it's the one that's going to cause the constipation the most out of all of them. And I think it's because I'm not sure the others are as dry as that. It feels like, I mean, it's pumice. It looks like pumice at the end of the day. And the dryness of pumice is unbelievable. So, you know, it's going into a gut. And the idea of the large intestine is to get rid of the fluid so that you have a nice formed stool. But if the cliniptilolite's absorbing all the fluid and you're not hydrated, then you're just going to be struggling to go to the loo. So sometimes it's not great, but I do love it as a heavy metal detoxifier. Quicksilver also do that detox cube, but that's massively expensive. The beauty of it is everything's in one box and you just follow the instructions in the box. So it's nice and easy from that perspective, but it's just cost. There's a company called Toxease who make the MET and the Toxease bind. I haven't used them very much because where I find something really good, I just tend to stick to it and then maybe add things to it where I need to. The Metal X Synergy, I've not used very much either. MT Supreme I have now and again. Fulvic acid, yeah, I love fulvic acid. And, you know, the fulvic acid is great for the kids, isn't it? Because you're getting the antiviral aspects from it. It basically is a little bit of black soil you put in a drink and they're just drinking a black drink. So, you know, you can flavour that with whatever. Excuse me, sweet pea. If they've got, if they're starting to dump heavy metals into the brain, you need to jump in quick and have lipoic acid ready, because that's the only thing that that crosses the blood-brain barrier to protect the brain. So I always tell them to keep that handy. And some do really well with either liposomal or N-acetylglutathione, because that's going to mop up as well. So there's lots of stuff to choose from. It's a matter of being confident in your choice, I think, and then saying which is going to be right for this person. But I think out of all of them, the one I've used the most, without a doubt, is the Clinic Tillalite. And then with the kids, it's been more, until we had the over-the-counter one, Enteris gel, I always used fulvic acid with the kids. For detox support, the Live GB is Designs for Health. So that's liver and gallbladder detoxification and protection. The Kidney Protect is obviously kidney, and that is also Designs for Health. NT Factor is nutritional something or other, but it's called NT Factor, so you'll find it. Mitochondria NRG is exactly as it says. It's for mitochondrial support should you need it. I tend to find with mine, I don't put the mitochondrial support in right until the end, because there's no point, because they're not going to feel any better, and they don't really get an awful lot of resolution of the symptoms from that, and it's an expensive product. So I tend to say, right, let's just mop everything up first, and then let's put it in. PC I could put in right from the beginning if they can afford it, and if they want to do it that way, and if the body's calling for that. I love PC. I love beta TCP as well, which is a combination of beetroot complex and taurine. The dose for beta TCP says one, I don't know if it says 1 per meal or 1 per day on the bottle, but you can use up to 4 per meal. I usually warn these kind of people that because they've got a lot of suppressed emotions sat in the gallbladder, and we're going to turf all the toxins out of the gallbladder, because we're going to make the bile flow so that the liver can release its toxins. What we're going to get is we're going to get almost like we're going to get the dam wall breaking down, and when all the toxins start to come out, the emotions come with it, and so they might be in tears for a few days, or they might have panic attacks, or they might just generally feel emotionally unstable, angry, whatever. I just warn them that might happen. And then when it does happen, it's not such a scary thing. And I also always start them off with one and then titrate up gradually, do it really slowly. Because I've never known anybody be able to go on a full dose of that and survive the emotional onslaught that it brings, which is why I love the product. So, we're not sending them for emotional detox, we're doing it with them. Bless them. Citrulline can often work because obviously that raises nitric oxide, and there's nothing like nitric oxide for keeping us healthy, is there? There's one of our ex-students from NCA who is what is she? She's a dental hygienist, doing loads of stuff on nitric oxide and getting people to breathe properly, and making things for the mouth to make sure they shut the mouth at night, because if we don't have nitric oxide, we walk around like zombies. So that's interesting stuff as well. And people who've got tongue ties tend to suffer with low nitric oxide because they mouth breathe. And as I said earlier, the Nutrient 950 might be the supplement of choice. It's definitely the one that's the big overall, covers everything. So as long as they're not going to react to everything, that might be the thing to choose at this point in time. If we're going into discussions about viral load, these are the things we might use. So olive leaf, nano silver, I do use quite a lot actually. I always have a bottle at the side of the sink, and I use Healthy House's nano silver. And it's one of those things you can just take 30 mils and I've done with it, and it just it sees off any virus, cold, flu, whatever. So I always have that handy. Cat's claw I've used quite a bit, and monolaurin avail. Is that Designs for Health? I can't remember if that's Designs for Health or Biotics. Reishi mushroom, there's loads of research on reishi. Echinacea I don't tend to use. very much, really, because I find with a lot of my patients, it makes them tired. And then Optizinc, of course. Extras to consider. So these are kind of people who to refer to. So limbic kindling, we talked a lot about, retraining the brain, and that's the link to Annie Hopper's work, retrainingthebrain.com. I think for somebody who's super, super sensitive, who's afraid of food, afraid of taking the next supplement, afraid of doing anything, in their heads, in their story, they have to do DNRS. So I, excuse me, would give them that link to retraining the brain. And there's a nice questionnaire on that site that will convince them whether they need it or not. And so, you know, if they get a positive on the test, then they know they've got to go that route. And to be honest, I would say to them, I'm quite happy to support them and just do the basics for now, which is just nutrition. I don't do any supplements at that point in time, because half the time you can't get them to change even the diet because they're so scared of everything they're going to react to that just becomes a minefield. And so I always say to them, you've got to do at least 3 months DNRS and then come back and we'll start to do the diet stuff. And then when they come back for the diet stuff, then I'd enlist an EFT practitioner, because they'll change a lot of the mindset stuff within that program. But if it's anything hanging over that hasn't been that obvious, because they're not focusing on nutrition, they're focusing on everything. There might be a certain food that is a trigger, and you might want this person to eat this food, and often you can just get them to do that with EFT, which is 1 or 2 sessions, and then they do it themselves. So I often would use that as well to get them back into it. But you will see on the site, if you look at the reviews on the site, all the people who've given really nice testimonials are saying a lot of their food intolerances have gone as a result of just doing DNRS. Which says a lot in itself, doesn't it? I mean, it's all about getting the nervous system back into parasympathetic. The other things, if you've got fibromyalgia, pain, organ dysfunction, or even if you haven't, if you're just stressed out of your head and you've got an NSA practitioner local to you, as I said, this is one of my favourite things. I think I've been doing this 7 years now, and I won't be without it, because even though I consider myself to be fairly normal now, I wasn't when I first started going there, definitely not. And now I kind of see that this is self-care for me, and I see the guy twice a week, and I consider that that's my gift to myself for helping everybody else. And it helps me to stay balanced, because if I've got stuff that I'm hanging on to from my patients during the week, then I go and see him and he shifts it all out of my energy field, and I just feel so much better. And, you know, the patients that I send for this therapy, they come back and they say, I don't know why you sent me there. I don't know what the heck he's doing, but it really makes a difference. You know, and I mean, that's because they don't understand it, because none of us do. It took me a good 4 years to understand what it was even doing. And then coupled with that, there's the body work. So somatorespiratory integration is a breathing technique that allies with network spinal. And it's based on Donny Epstein's work, The 12 Stages of Healing. And actually, you can do that remotely now. There's a lovely lady in Manchester called Rachel Talbot, who's set up a system where she does this for people, or she teaches people this online. And it's brilliant, because it's getting you to connect back to your body, getting you to feel again. And when you feel, you release your traumas and they're out of the way. And this doing the somatorespiratory integration side of it means that when these things come up, we're very good at running away from them, because we don't want to feel. It feels horrible, doesn't it? When you've got a trauma that's coming up, it feels horrible, you know, or a trigger. And we don't know what to do with it. And what this stuff teaches us is just to connect to it, because when you connect to it somatically, it dissipates in seconds. So I love that. Rolfing, it's a bit hard work for me, rolfing. I think it's really good, because it's muscular work. It gets right into your muscles and pulls the trauma out that way. Because again, you know, emotions are energy in motion. And so all that energy that's not moving just gets trapped up, and the muscle just goes like this, and rolfing just uncouples the muscle. And it's really good for like neck stuff, because we carry all our traumas, neck and shoulders, and all our everyday crap. We carry all our family stuff in our hips, especially the girls. So that's that one. Massage can work a treat, and especially if you've got somebody who does massage with essential oils, and they're more kind of thinking about emotions rather than this essential oil gets rid of this bug. If you've got someone who thinks the other way, you get a much better service from that. Yoga and Pilates, amazing, but not kind of general stand on your head type yoga or the rigorous Pilates we know. Yoga therapy and Pilates therapy are really designed for people who have had accidents and who are in a recovery phase or chronic fatigue. They're also, even though they don't tell you, they're also designed to release trauma, because any movement in the body, if you're doing stretching, etc., you're going to change your energy field. And you know, half of the time we don't even think about, why do I feel better after that? And that's the reason, because we're just clearing all our crap that we're holding on to. Biofield tuning is lovely. People can do that online now, because we now know that we're connected to people right across the world. We're all connected. Biofield tuning, they can do remotely, treat you remotely, and most of their practitioners are in the US. I mean, I've done some basic training with them, but I'm waiting to go to the US to finish my training, and it all got stopped. But I love that stuff. Brilliant. We talked about vagal nerve stimulators, so there's a couple here to consider. The Modius is a headband one that connects with two pads to the backs of your ears on your bony part, just behind your ears. It works on stimulating the vestibular system, which then in turn stimulates your vagus nerve. The thing I find with that one is you've got a scale of 0 to 10, so you have to start low and build it up. And you're supposed to get it to the exact place where it makes you just feel a bit woozy. You're not supposed to fall down dizzy, but it makes you woozy. So if you're going to do that for an hour or 2 hours a day, which is what is recommended, you've got to really lay down with it on. You can't really run around the house. And actually, if you're stimulating your vagus nerve, why are you running around the house anyway? It's counterproductive. So that is the one I bought, I have to say, and I used it loads. I've given it away now, but I used it loads and I loved it. But you do have to sit down with it. The Vegas.net you can wear on your arm, and it stimulates from your arm. So you can wear that all the time, and you can set it to whatever mood you want to be in, and it really does work. There's another one called Apollo Neuro, which you wear on the inside of your wrist. And I think the Apollo Neuro, certainly in the emotional detox group, seems to be the one that's favoured, because they can wear it 24/7. So it's more gentle, but they just keep it going. You program it with your phone by Bluetooth, and then you turn the Bluetooth off, so you're not affected by EMFs or anything. And the Sensei, I absolutely love that for the teens. Sensei is a little pebble. It's created by Stefan Schmelik, who is a lovely doctor who realised 30 years ago that stress was a big problem, and all his Harley Street clinic is about stress. What he's got in there is amazing. You kind of walk in and it's like, you know, it's all really serene, and you've got a nice leather couch to lie on, and yeah, it's just lovely. And he designed this Sensate, and the Sensate is an app that you have on your phone with your headphones. It's Bluetooth, unfortunately, but you know, that's the way of the world right now. And then you get this vibrating pebble, and the pebble is on a string that goes around your neck, and it lays just across your breastbone. On the app, you've got different types of music, which are kind of binaural beats, medical music. And so what's happening is the medical music is putting the binaural beats, isochronic tones into the head, which is balancing your brain chemistry. And then the sensate is vibrating on the chest, bringing you back to, what's the word, in the moment, and balancing the vagus nerve, increasing vagal tone. And every time you go off into your own world, because this is what happens when we start to relax, the brain starts and we go, I'm off there. And what happens is the sensate vibrates even harder to bring you back and to make you aware that you've gone off. So, and the teens just love that. So I often recommend that first. It is the cheapest of all of them as well. The only downside, I think, to the sensate is you can only use it for 30 minutes and then the battery's dead, and then you've got to put it on for X number of hours to recharge it again. So it kind of put me off in the end, because I'm one of these, once I get down there, I want to stay there an hour. But that might be just me, you know, everybody else would say, right, 20 minutes, I'm off, but not me, you know. So that was the only thing that stopped me using it. Plus I got the Modius at that point as well. Gravity blankets, I absolutely love them. I have to say, I still sleep under mine. They were designed based on some lovely research that a really famous autism spectrum person called, oh golly, what's her name? Temple Grandin. She worked in animal husbandry, and she designed it. She realized that when animals were going to the slaughterhouse, etc., they were incredibly stressed, almost like they knew where they were going, and probably they do because they're more connected to nature than we are. And she developed this squeeze machine where this animal went in, and then these two, I don't know, these two big things came towards it and just squeezed it like a cuddle, basically. And that de-stressed the animals. So what's happened is all the autism spectrum mums have been watching this woman evolve, you know, and looking and saying, well, she's got autism. She knows it from the inside. All these doctors and etc., they're just going from neurotypical functioning. They don't understand my child, so I'm going to listen to her. And then what's happened as a result of that is parents have gone and started up these they've looked at the mechanism around that, and then they've created these gravity blankets. So now we've got loads of people making gravity blankets, and the idea is you buy the weight that is about 10 grams higher than the total body weight of the person, and what they do is then they cocoon that person. So I think what they're doing is they're giving that feeling of being in the womb, because it's heavy and it's restrictive, and obviously it's warm because they are heavy. And what that does then, it just brings the central nervous system right down into a calming space, but it does it really quickly. And so certainly with the children, if you've got like autism spectrum pyroluric children who are already really stressed out of their heads, if you make that change too quickly, they're going to fear it, because it's not what they know, even though it's where they need to be. Because they're not familiar with that, because they've come from birth trauma, attachment trauma, and they've never known normality or parasympathetic. When we put them into parasympathetic, that's a big scare factor because they don't know it. And so what they'll tend to do is they'll kick off, or they'll get scared and they'll start running away, or whatever they do, you know, whatever their aberrant behavior is. And so what you have to do with them is you have to start really low and slow with this and introduce it really gradually. In the same way we would if we were doing a gluten-free diet, we'd have to just put a few grains of a few grains of nuts in there and then gradually get the gluten out. You've got to do the same with the blanket, because it makes such a drastic difference to them. So they're all gadgets you could use. But even before you go there, before you go and start spending money, these are some really good self-care practices. Making sure you get 20 minutes in nature every day with the shoes off, so that you're picking up the Schumann resonance or the ions from nature. That's the easiest way to ground. People who are incredibly anxious, stressed, they can't ground to save their lives. they're all out here. They're in out of body experiences most of the time when you talk to them when they do come down. And again, this is what the NSA people see when they're doing their energy work. They go, "Oh, you were out of your body today," you know, that kind of thing. It's walking on the sea edge. You know, anybody who lives near the coast, you know how therapeutic it is to just get your shoes off and walk just walk, you know, in paddling depth, and just walk along the water's edge. And you're picking up the ions and the Schumann resonance from the earth. We all think it's because we've just de-stressed or we've been on holiday. Well, yeah, that's part of it. We've been away from the hamster wheel, but also we never pick those ions up. I once read a beautiful book called Black Elk Speaks, written by a North American Indian. And when shoes first came into being, and bearing in mind they had leather soles then, not rubber, we're totally insulated from the earth's Schumann resonance right now. And we're all supposed to vibrate with that as well, by the way. But what this guy said in this book was the Indians started to come in shoes, and he would take one look at them and say, "Take those off, they'll make you sick." And here we are buying gravity blankets and grounding sheets and everything to try and help us ground. And half the reason we can't ground is because we're wearing rubber-soled shoes. So it makes sense to take your shoes off and go and stand on your grass for 5 minutes every day. And it's not huge, is it really? Breathing, heart math techniques. As I said, no one needs to be a super sleuth at breathing techniques. There's two really lovely ones here. The quick coherence, and you don't have to take these particular YouTubes as gospel, because there must be about 15 of each on YouTube. I've just chosen two that seem okay. But when you're asking a patient to do this stuff, the music's got to resonate, the tempo's got to resonate, the person's voice has got to resonate. Because anybody who's anxious and stressed out of their heads, if all of that doesn't resonate, they're never going to go near it. And it could be a really valuable tool. So what I say to mine is, this is one link. And when you go and look at that link, just try and find a voice that suits you and something that resonates with you. But find the quick coherence or find the heart locking. The quick coherence, Heart Math recommend that you do this for 20 minutes, morning and evening. And it is all about just a natural, slow, deep breath. They go 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. You can buy the Heart Math sensor from Amazon or from Heart Math UK if you want to do it all scientifically, measure heart rate variability, join the group where it's all kind of mass consciousness stuff. You can do all of that if you want, but you don't have to. You can just do it from YouTube. So the quick coherence is 20 minutes, morning and evening, and that sets the nervous system up. And then the heart locking is 60 to 90 seconds. And that's really meant for every time you come up against a challenge or you think you're going to be challenged, you just do that before, during and after. So let's say you're going to be given a presentation, you're going to be standing on stage, there's 400 people out there, it's the first time you've ever been up there, and you're scared stiff, and who wouldn't be? What you would do is you do your heart locking for 60 to 90 seconds, then you'd go on stage, and at a point where you've got a lull because they're either looking at something or you're watching a video, or there's something that's breaking the pattern, you can then do it again for another 90 seconds, and when you come off stage you do it again. And what that does is it just keeps bringing you back to your own center so that you're not getting anxious about being in that situation. And you can do that for anything. I normally tell my patients to practice that every hour, on the hour, throughout the day, whatever they're doing. I don't tell them to stop what they're doing, because you can do that while you're washing pots, or you can do it while you're breastfeeding your baby. It's no big deal, is it, that you sat there anyway. And the reason I tell them to do that is because when if they've practiced it enough, it's all that neural training stuff. If they practice this enough, each time they come into a situation where they've got a stressful thing coming up, or they're starting to get stressed, the body will eventually know what to do, and immediately it'll go into slow, deep breathing. So what we're doing is we're teaching the body to do that naturally, because this is what these bodies are designed to do. We're actually only designed to be in the stress response for 15 minutes every 14 days. And look how we live. And that comes from, what's the book? It's got a zebra on the front. Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. Amazing book. It's all about the stress response. And yeah, what they're saying there is 15 minutes every two weeks. And we're just crazy, aren't we? The other thing that can help is creative activities. And I don't know about what you people are experiencing, but what I'm seeing is certainly on the female side, this kind of is almost a feminine rising movement going on, because we're all kind of going back to all the creative stuff. We're all saying, hang on a minute, I haven't done that for donkey's years. I haven't painted for years. I haven't sung for years. I haven't created anything. I haven't done any crochet or knitting or whatever it is that floats your boat. And we're all going back to that. And a lot of the self-care practices and courses that are coming up online now as a result of COVID, it's certainly from kind of the shamanic people, the life coachy type people, they're all looking at creative activities, writing school, stuff like that. Everything that we thought was a bit archaic in school days, we're all going, yeah, I want to do that. I want to reflect on a few words, so all of that can help. Meditations, vibrational healing, because you've got to do the practical work. You can't throw a load of supplements at this and go, this will heal you, because it just won't. They've got to put the work in. I love solfeggio tunes. Solfeggio tones, again, tons of research behind them. There's 9 of them, and each frequency does a certain thing. So the frequency 542 hertz is DNA healing, and that's the love frequency. So when I've got a kid who's troubled, and the family are troubled because they can't keep his behaviour under control, what I say to that mum is, put the 542 solfeggio on low overnight when he's sleeping, because then it goes in subliminally while he's sleeping, and you're not annoying him through the day putting this weirdo tone on. There's a lovely guy called Lee Harris Energy, who is a musician, but he's also kind of a spiritual personal development guy. And he just brought an album out last year called Awaken. And he's embedded the 542 frequency throughout his music, throughout that Awaken album. And it's a really lovely album, particularly for the girls. It's kind of a bit lovey-dovey one. But it is all about kind of the awakening process. So it's more on the kind of spiritual side, but yeah, the fact that it's got 542 solfeggio in there just beats it for me. So I often kind of recommend that kind of stuff. I'll take them to the solfeggio tunes, which Power Thoughts Meditation Club are probably the best people for this stuff. And they've got a YouTube channel where you can listen to it all for free. And then they've got a website where you can download whatever you want onto your iTunes or whatever modality you use, and it costs peanuts, pennies basically. So solfeggio I love. Binaural beats are the same. Binaural beats, they work with Schumann resonance, and they are a different, I think there are 3 hertz difference in tone going into each ear. So what that does is the brain then has to make up the difference to make the sound, and so you're getting the right and left brain speaking to each other. Binaural beats, again, if you go on YouTube and you look at the dementia and binaural beats research, or even Parkinson's, these are the people they've done all the research on. What you'll find is the dementia people, give them binaural beats in headphones for 5 minutes, and those who never held a conversation for years will hold a conversation or will recite a sentence, put words together. And for those of you who know dementia, what happens is you get single words after a while, and then you get nothing at all, and then you might get an odd word every 6 days because they just forget how to communicate. And the binaural beats brings that back, while ever they're listening to it, of course. With the Parkinson's, they've got some YouTube videos where they've put the binaural beats on for 5 minutes, and the people with Parkinson's have got up and literally been able to dance gently with another person. So I just think when you see stuff like that, it's worth looking at. The other meditations that I often recommend are Nikki Sky's, who was Nikki Gratrix. She's renamed herself. And she's got 4. She's got field clearance, self-love, abundant health, and ascension. And for my patients, the most important ones, I think, are the self-love and the abundant. Now, these are all in order, so they just follow list order. So this is self-love, this is abundant health. And what she's doing there is she's talking in this one about how they got their preconditioning between the ages of 0 and 6. She's not mentioning 0 and 6, but she's saying how they got their perspective of who they are in this world and how that's might be manifesting, and then how to rethink about themselves. So she's retraining the brain into rethinking yourself as a lovely being, you know, and we all need to do that because we're all struggling, and especially the pyrolurics. They absolutely need to do it because their anxiety comes from they've just got a crappy self-belief system for whatever reason. The abundant health, that's a really lovely one as well, because what she's doing there is she's getting people into a nice state with the breathing technique, and then she's inviting them to imagine that divine light is coming into the body and flooding all the cells, and the cells are healing. And so she's talking through all that healing process. And a lot of this is mindset, you know. The body can heal if you give it the right messages. So these, I think, are beautiful for people. They're not for everybody, obviously, nothing's for everybody, but it's a case of just looking at them and going, will that suit that person? And then kind of the overall feel, we looked at this right at the beginning, the 5 levels of healing. I always have this model on my desk because I always think, where is this person's issues right now? And so I look at where, I listen to what they're saying, and if it's belief system, I might look at something like this, you know, EFT, TFT, mental field therapy, homeopathy. Homeopathy is lovely for this kind of stuff, and we don't even think that because constitutional homeopathy is beyond our understanding. You know, so I just look at that and I think, okay, what kind of things might I send them to? I ask them what they've already done, obviously. It'll come out in the thing, and then I will just say, right, I think you could do with some of that. But one of the reasons I send a lot of mine for network spinal is because it does all of these 4 levels, and the person doesn't have to be regurgitating the story to somebody. They don't have to be doing a therapy that they're not familiar with, that they might not feel comfortable with, and literally they're on a bench and someone else is doing it for them. And there's a lot of this, the patients that we get, there's a lot of them giving their power away to us to heal them because they don't realize they can heal themselves. But what they learn through those techniques is that actually they are healing themselves, because as they heal all these 4 levels, their mindset changes, their attitude to life changes, their perspective on where they are, because they might come in as a victim, but then eventually they'll actually see, actually, it was my attachment or my birth trauma that allowed me to let that energy into my field, and that made me feel bad about myself. And once they get that, that's life-changing for all of them. So it is a case of what is right for this person, but some of you might know more about all of these than I do, and so I just go with what I know. I think the biggest stuff that we often need to do is they need to do that for themselves. We can't take them down a spiritual path. The energy body is where I kind of work more than anything. But then as you're working on the energy body, their perspective is changing. So you're working on this as well, because you're discussing what, if they're discussing it with you, you might be discussing what's happened. Or they'll certainly be discussing it with somebody, maybe not you. But I just love that model, really. So that's kind of how we deal with it all. So there's loads there. Sorry, you might need to listen to it again, but you know, it'll keep you busy. So shall we have a quick 10-minute break again? And then what I'll do is I'll put Marta's case up in the chat box, and then we can have a look at it when we come back and just spend half an hour really, see what we can do to help Marta's case. How does that sound? Thumbs up. Okay, bless you. What time is it? It's 25 past. So if we come back about 22, that all right? And then we should finish at 4:30. It'll be good. All right. Enjoy.